Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first WoW Live of 2023. WoW Live is our weekly appointment with Awe and Wonder, and today we are joined by Sam Wass, Professor Sam Wass from the University of East London, director of the Babylab. We have been here together last year, I think it was maybe October, November, and we're really, really excited about having you back. So, welcome, Sam.
Hi, well, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And so today we're going to talk about attention and how that what it is, and I was about to say how that works and doesn't work in babies, and then I guess we're going to go and redefine that whole concept of what it is, attention that works well or not. So it's really, really nice to have you back. But just in case there is somebody that joins us and hasn't heard from you before, would you mind kind of telling us who you are and what brought you at the University of East London today?
Yeah, so I basically, really nice to be here, Sylvia. So basically, I do research into kind of early development of the two things that I work at the interface between stress and concentration. So last time I was on, I was talking quite a lot about the research that we're doing into stress and putting little stress sensors on babies and their parents. And then looking at, how when the child gets upset, how the parent's stress levels change in response to the child getting upset and that type of thing. So that's kind of one area of the research I do. The other area of the research I do is on, what we, treat in, psychology and neuroscience as something, a property of the mind, which is kind of attention or concentration. So, very, very coarsely, if you get your people to stick up their hand and define concentration, they talk about in terms of focus. So being able to focus on one thing. There's these lovely quotes from, going back to Aristotle about, I can see two things, in front of me, but I'm only processing, I'm only focusing on one thing at once. So both of these kind of things are reaching my eyes. They're both inside me, but I'm only aware of one thing at once. So what is it that is, some type of a filtering process that means I've got two things, but I'm only kind of aware of one thing. Obviously, it's a massive important topic. There's loads and loads of research. If you give kind of experiments on this to children, then how well they perform at this pure ability to focus on one thing and ignore distractions is very predictive of how well they perform across all subjects at school. It's one of the things that if you measure it in a 4-year-old when they're starting school, it predicts how well they do in maths, but also how well they do in history and how well they do in French and everything like that. So it's a real core domain kind of general learning mechanism. I'm not going to be talking much about the relationship between stress and concentration, but just really quickly, the reason I got into it was because for my PhD, I was designing loads and loads of concentration tasks for babies, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second. But one of my big frustrations was I could tell that how well they were performing is very, very related to their stress levels. So if you watch a baby, in a particular situation, then there's a really, really strong relationship between their emotional state and how well they can do this pure thing of focusing. Like probably particularly for, it's true for us too, when I'm upset or anxious or something like that, I can't concentrate so well, but it's even stronger, we think, for babies. So that's what got me interested in the relationship. But not going to be talking so much about the stress side today, more just about this kind of pure idea of concentration. Shall I just quickly, Sylvia, just say, just in terms of like a little bit of background before we got onto the main stuff I wanted to talk about, which is, how children concentrate differently. How babies concentrate. I think about this a lot. I've got an 18-month-old and a 3.5-year-old at home. 18-month-olds, you sit reading a book with her. She's always one of those, just wants to jump off and start toddling around the room. She's getting there, but, I spent a long time thinking about, concentration with her. Like Freddie, her brother, was always straight away. Like you put a book in front of him, he's just glued, like he just freezes like that. But Rose, my daughter, has always been very, very different. Like it's always been big. So there's lots to say about, how children concentrate differently, how concentration develops. Big message I want to get across is, it's not just a question of deficit. Children do for reasons we understand quite well, they don't concentrate as well as us. They find it harder to focus on one thing and ignore distractions. But it's not just a question of deficit. The big message I want to get across is they concentrate differently, not just worse. And that really helps them at some forms of early learning. So there's some forms of learning that babies can do where they massively outperform adults. And we think that's to do with how they concentrate differently. So that's the kind of where I want to get to.
Yeah, because when we sorry,
yeah,
no, it just made me think that when we think about it, they might well concentrate less than us, but they learn so much more than us every single day.
yeah, yeah,
So they
yeah.
must be doing something right?
Yeah. So when I talk to early years teachers and that type of thing, this is an idea that sometimes they look up a little bit reluctant to think about. But I always make that point that, you know, because early years teachers are are often very much focused on, you know, and a lot of education is about training them to be more adult-like. Yeah. So if you've got a 4-year-old who's not so good at keeping their bum on the seat for a very long period of time, yeah, we focus on that as, you know, a deficit, and we try and address that as a deficit. And one of the things I'm really keen to get across is, you know, there are certain things that they're not so good at, but they're massively more effective at learning than us. Yeah, babies, you know, just language learning is the one that everyone agrees with. Yeah, you know, kids pick up language much faster, and so we shouldn't. When we're thinking about education, we shouldn't just be trying to make them more adult-like. Yeah, because there's a very real risk that in trying to make them more adult-like, we will be kind of losing their ability to whatever it is that means that they're faster at learning than we are. And I've got kind of quite specific kind of things, some examples of that specifically from language learning and how we do language learning to illustrate that. But just quickly before we get onto that, Sylvia, just to give a quick background, I just wanted to start with, so basically, so for my PhD, I did I designed kind of concentration exercises in babies. So the idea wasn't, like, a lot of what I'm talking about now is kind of in reaction to all of that. But basically, where I was doing my PhD 15 years ago was like, if you've got a child who's not so good at concentrating, we want to train them to concentrate better. Yeah. You know, things like if I've got an older sibling with ADHD, I'm more likely to develop ADHD myself. Yeah. So what I did for my PhD, and I spent a long time doing it since, is kind of designing these little tasks. We use an eye tracker. So the baby sits in front of a screen and different things happen depending on where they're looking. And we basically design those tasks to try to train the children to concentrate better. After quite a lot of £1 million worth of research and a lot of time, the answer is we can't, basically. Like all forms of, you know, computerized concentration training, you know, there's loads of stuff with working memory training in schools, that type of thing. The answer is it doesn't work very well. Which is
Thank
interesting.
you for putting it so plainly for everybody to just listen to it.
I mean, there's many thousands of words been spent on this, like millions and millions of pounds of research money, because it is an important topic, and we don't really understand why, but it just doesn't work. But anyway, so that it was a lot of fun though. It got me a lot of fun, interesting memories and lovely people that I worked with and that type of thing. But yeah, and then the other thing that I've done quite a lot of is designing concentration tests for atypical children. So for children developing autism, children developing ADHD, children developing anxiety. So the kind of trying to assess how their concentration is different. And then also now we're doing a lot of kind of real world kind of face-to-face interaction. So that's a little bit about my background in terms of, you know, where I've come to this from.
And do you find like a better success in designing concentration tests for the atypical developing children, or is it hard there as well?
I mean, that's a good question. So we can find things that are predictive of autism. So, for example, I found that, you know, how frequently babies move their eyes is one thing that, like, it doesn't completely. A lot of these things, on average, babies move their eyes who are in early stages of developing autism can't keep their eye gaze on one thing for as long a period of time as another. But it's not the question that you can diagnose autism off that. So on average, there's a slight group difference, you know, a significant group difference that I think we found in a couple of studies now. So it's there. But what we can't tell from that is you can't diagnose a child with autism from that. But also we can't tell that that's like a key part, you know. with autism, there are so many different things at so many different levels, from the genetics to the neurobiology to the brain development and that type of thing. And you can't tell what's really key. Like, lots of things go wrong, and lots of things going wrong causes lots of other things to go wrong. So what's really tricky to find is this just like a peripheral thing that's not particularly important to what's actually causing the problem, or is this actually causing other problems? So that's a bit that we're not so sure of, and it's really, really hard to be sure about it. The only way we can answer that is by training it and then showing that it fixes the autism, and that's what it doesn't do. So that makes us think, it might just be something that's less important. I hope no funders are watching this, by the way, because we're much too honest. Never be this honest with the people who actually have the money to do the research.
It is so precious to have your kind of your view and that you're sharing this with us, because we have this we get people kind of giving you the thumb up here, because it's nice to we like, I guess the general public has this idea of scientists as this kind of people that just know stuff, and and it's true for sure, a lot of things, but at the same time, like, your job is about struggling with those problems and finding answers. And I hear that you end up finding many more questions and answers in the end.
Yeah, and that's particularly true at the moment, because so basically with educational psychology with older kids, like, a lot of people are very, very obsessed by the fact that, like, historically, for me, when I was like starting in research like 15 years ago, a lot of people were very focused on this idea that if you do a pure concentration test, this thing that I started with, that it predicts how well children perform at everything. Yeah. So and that's a very reliable finding. Like, lots and lots of people have found that. But it's a real challenge that if you train concentration, they don't actually get better at doing it. So this is a real, there's a lot of soul searching happening by researchers in my thing. Like, how important are these tests that we've been giving kids for all these years? So yeah, lots to think about. But I mean, maybe let's not get too much about that, because from the point of view of, a parent at home thinking about their child's concentration and that type of thing, it definitely is something that, you definitely want to. I definitely want to be able to keep my daughter Rose's bum on the floor or on my lap for long enough to actually read a book. Yeah, and that definitely does help when she can do something like that for long periods of time. So that's the type of thing that I think is really relevant for parents. So there's loads and loads and loads of stuff to say about that, as we go.
Yeah. So let's look at it. What happens when children pay attention, or babies that pay attention? Like, how does that all develop?
Yeah. So very basically, Sylvia, there's kind of there's two systems that I think I thought it might be useful for parents to be thinking about. So there's basically the way that how we pay attention works is basically is a kind of a push-pull between things that are in the outside world trying to attract our attention, and our own inner capacity to say, I don't want to pay attention to that. I want to pay attention to something else. Yeah. So imagine, I'm on a newspaper website as, I always sound like a crusty old man when I say this, but like, when I started reading the newspaper on the websites, they didn't have all of these videos playing next to the side of the thing, and nowadays pretty much every newspaper website has lots of autoplay videos and things that start moving. Yeah. So the reason that they do that is because we know that movement is a thing that if we're in a situation and there's a lot of movement happening, it's very hard not to pay attention to it. Yeah. So movement is one of these things that automatically pulls our attention in the outside world. Yeah. We know that that ability, that when there's something interesting happening, to pull our attention to it, we know that develops very early. Yeah. So if you like hold a bunch of keys in front of a baby's face and jangle them, then the baby can get stuck on your keys. We call it sticky fixation, where they get stuck, and you can literally keep it going, as long as you're moving the keys around, they're looking at them. It's the same with edges. So parents of young babies at home might have noticed that when there's a sharp edge, so for example, if it's a sunny day and you've got the curtains closed, then you'll get a sharp line of light on the edge of the curtain. Or if you've got a shadow coming through a thing, and you get a sharp line on the thing. Parents often say, I definitely noticed with my own kids that, like, a young baby, a 2-month-old might be, interacting with you, but all that they can stick on is that edge on the wall behind you. Yeah, I used to find it quite disconcerting. Freddie, mine in particular, my son would never wouldn't look me in the eye till about 3 months, but he was always looking behind my back at edges and that type of thing. So anyway, so this first thing, which is what in the outside world like sucks in our attention, yeah, is very early developing. So a kid will watch, a young baby will watch movement and it will watch edges in exactly the same way that an adult will. Yeah. But if for us as adults, there's another thing, which is what do I want to be paying attention to? Yeah. So like, where do I want to be looking and where do I want to be allocating my attention? And that is very slow developing. Yeah. So so that, you know, is still developing even by 15, 16, 17. Yeah. So the reason that that's important is because, and from my experience, like even so parents are often unaware of this, but even like educators, people working in early years settings are really unaware of this, that children find it much harder to filter out distractions than adults do. Yeah. So if I'm in a situation where, you know, I can hear 10 people talking, yeah, but I'm talking to you, so I'm filtering out, you know, all this other work, all this other things. Our adult brains are very, very practiced at doing that. Yeah. Children find it much, much harder to do that. They really can't do that. Yeah. And there's lots of studies, you know, looking at showing that, you know, like by measuring their brain, you can measure how much their brain is processing these other speech streams where they're trying to pay attention to one thing. You can measure it behaviorally. Like we're quite confident that children find that type of task much harder. Yeah. And the irony is that if ever you're in a situation where there's a lot going on and your brain is constantly having to work really, really hard to filter out these distractions, yeah, you're thinking about something like a nursery setting, yeah, where there's a massive amount of light and movement and color, and it's really, really hard to shut out distractions and focus on one thing, yeah, or a reception or an early years classroom, yeah, which are really bright, busy, noisy places where there's a lot of movement, a lot of edges, a lot of things trying to attract our attention, and our brains have to work really, really hard to filter out all this background noise to focus on one thing, yeah. So it's just this irony that children's brains find it harder to filter out distractions, yeah, and yet at the same time we put them in super, super, super distracting environments where there's a lot going on. Yeah. So I present this type of stuff a lot to early years teachers, you know, saying you just have to be aware of this. You have to be thinking about minimizing sound. You know, they find it really, really hard to listen to one person talking while there's background noise going on. And you have to be thinking about minimizing visual things. But for parents raising babies at home, it's exactly the same type of thing. So for example, a nice study came out suggesting that, you know, a lot of families have the TV on in the background a lot, or the radio on in the background. And some studies have shown that children don't learn language so well in a situation where there's a caregiver talking to them. Yeah. So their mum is talking to them or their dad is talking to them, but in an environment where there's speech happening in the background as well. Yeah. And it's because their brains aren't so well able to say, right, I'm listening to daddy and I'm filtering out this background noise. Yeah. So that's the type of thing that children can't do so well, but a lot of parents wouldn't be aware of that. Yeah.
So I think we
very good at it, so we assume it's an easy task. Yeah.
I think it's really worth flagging that out because that has really big implications for parents. Simplify the environment, basically. If you want your child to concentrate, just look at the way at the environment she's immersed in during the day, and see what you can take out. Because I guess in our day and age, in this part of the world, the struggle is actually to less is more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it works in lots of ways. It works in terms of speech, but it also works in terms of vision too. So the best way, and this isn't something I feel I did very well with my own kids, even though I tried to think about it, but the best way to communicate with a baby, so a young babies in particular, find just simply seeing a face to be really hard. Yeah. So they find it much, much harder than we do. And again, these are the types of tasks that our adult brains are so good at. We don't even realize it's doing something, but you're looking at me and your brain is working out, okay, these are the edges of my face. Yeah. This like picture of my nieces and nephews behind me, that's something else. Yeah, I'm separating out those objects.
Yeah.
And within my face, these are my eyebrows, these are my eyes, you know, this is my mouth. Yeah. So babies' brains find that type of task much harder to do. So because it's this same idea of kind of filtering out things. So the best way to talk to a baby is to have your face directly facing them, yeah, against a white background if it's possible behind you. Yeah. So it's really easy for the baby to work out where the edges of your head are. Yeah. And even things like wearing eyeliner to accentuate your eyes and lipstick to accentuate your lips. Yeah. There's evidence suggesting that makes it easier for a baby to find your kind of key features, because this process of like filtering out and focusing on one thing is really, really hard. So that's why cartoon faces, for example. So children love to watch cartoons because cartoon faces are simple. Yeah. So every single cartoon face you ever look at will have big black eyes big black lines around the eyes, and big black lines around the mouth. Yeah. And big black lines around the edge of that of the face. Certainly all like early years cartoons will do. And that's
so it's basically
exactly the same reason. It's to make it easy. It's easy to filter out distracting things, because that's what they find hard.
Yeah, basically when we think about them interacting with us, they kind of have to read our face really to understand, okay, that's a face that's different from the wall under behind you, and if we try and make it easy for them to read our face, to get the message that, okay, that's a face there, and that face is interacting with me. Yeah, as you were saying, we don't even think it's a thing. But
no, you're completely unaware of your own brain's doing it. But it's one of those things. We're doing millions of really, really complicated computations, you know, minute by minute. Particularly this idea of like, I'm in my canteen or in a restaurant and I'm talking, and there's a speech going on here, but I'm completely unaware of it. Like, I have that amazing ability to just black out the thing. But if you think all that information is just hitting your eardrums in exactly the same way as the speech from the person, and what my brain is doing to reconstruct the speech, yeah, and work out, okay, that's two separate speech streams, but I'm interested in this one, so I'm going to blank out this. It's incredibly hard what our brain's doing, but we've just got no idea because like we're so good at it. But that's exactly what children can't do.
Yeah. And so this is the kind of attention that we almost only think about this kind of attention as attention, and we want the kids to develop that. So we call it kind of the good attention, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, okay. So I mean, if we've only got about 5 minutes left. So should we get on, Sylvia, to the stuff that we started talking about at the beginning, which is this idea that kind of we've been talking about this as, you know, good attention. Yeah. And it's very hard kind of not to think about it in those sense, because it's so fundamental to everything we perceive. Yeah. But there are these ideas that, you know, we've been talking about how we haven't actually talked very much about why, but if anyone's interested, just drop me a thing. There's lots of explanations about why children's brains find that harder. But one of the things I think is really important is this idea about kind of how finding it much harder to concentrate helps with early forms of learning. Yeah. So I'll give you an example of a type of task that children find hard. Yeah. So this is something like, I mean, when I'm doing this in talks, there's a worksheet where it says, you know, all insects have 6 legs and 3 body parts. Yeah. And then there's a picture of lots of different insects, and it says circle lots of different creatures, some of which have 6 legs and 3 body parts and some of which don't. And it says circle the ones that are an insect. Yeah. So what you have to do that task is you have to look at these different animals and shutter down your attention to say, okay, I'm only thinking about whether they've got 3 body parts or not. Yeah. So I'm just going through saying which has got 3 body parts, and I'm not getting distracted by the fact that one is green and my favorite color is green, and one is smiling and I like smiling, that type of thing. Yeah. And then you have to go back and you have to shutter down your attention. So you're only thinking, okay, which of them have got 6 legs? Yeah. Which of them don't? Yeah. So that's about this. We sometimes call it the attentional spotlight, like focusing on one thing. Yeah. That's what kids can't do. Yeah. But that ability to do it, and again, like, we're so good at it as adults, we don't even realize we're doing it. Yeah. That ability to shutter down things isn't what all learning is about. Yeah. So the big example of this is language learning. So when I'm doing second language learning, yeah, I'm basically mapping one set of words that I already know onto another. Yeah. So, I know that this is pen in English. So I know when I'm learning French, it's stylo, and, I'm mapping one word at things. Yeah. First language learning, the type that Rose, my 18-month-old, is very actively doing at the moment, is much, much, much harder than that. Yeah. We don't leave gaps between our words when we talk. Yeah, if you look at the acoustic pattern of speech, it's just one continuous unbroken stream of information. So how does Rose, my daughter, how does she even learn to work out where one word starts and the other word stops? Yeah. Let alone, most of the times I mention pen, like I'm not even looking at the pen. So how does she even work out that chunk of acoustic information maps onto this real word thing in the real world? It's an incredibly hard job. And we think, and it's pretty much because it's the only way that we think they can do it, the way that they do it is by spotting these very, very weak kind of patterns. Yeah. So, how you work out where one word ends and the other word starts is because there are these very weak patterns that kind of are more likely to happen around the ends of words. But we don't know what specific pattern it is. Yeah. So some colleagues of mine have been doing a lot of research looking at this, children's ability to spot patterns. Yeah. So they'll generate like a machine speech, like which has got some of these patterns in. Yeah. And they use these, and these are the types of things that spotting patterns like this, that's what our adult brain can't do. Yeah. So I've sat there and I've actually tried to spot these patterns. Yeah. That these babies are spotting absolutely fine. Yeah. And my 43-year-old adult brain just can't do that. Yeah. And I fail at the task. It's too hard for me. Like spotting a weak pattern, nobody's told me what the pattern is. Yeah. And babies, as I say, are really good at it. And we think it's because there's some really interesting research suggesting that it's because I can only think of one thing at once. Yeah. So I can have I have an attentional spotlight, I'm focusing on one thing. So the only way I can do that task is by thinking like maybe whenever it's a ba, that's followed by a ga. So I can have one hypothesis, then I'm listening to the speech stream. Yeah. And then that doesn't work. That's not right. So I have to chuck out that hypothesis, come up with another hypothesis. Yeah. It's the only way my 43-year-old can do that task. And it doesn't work. Like it doesn't fix the task. It's not good enough. Whereas babies can't do that, and they just let everything wash over them. They can't focus on one thing. Yeah. And something about that letting everything wash over them, yeah, means that they can do this language learning where it's just about spotting patterns. I've got no idea what type of patterns it is. I'm just like spotting regularities in my stimulus, and that's how I learn language. Yeah. So it's really amazing. And I think it's really important to say, because this is the type of learning we don't think about. Like we're not aware of our kids doing. Yeah. You think about them, learning a list of vocabulary at school, but this type of learning is really, really important, and probably, happens better when you can't concentrate.
That's fantastic. So basically, if your kid is not able to concentrate, it means they're learning.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
No, I think it's really, really helpful, because we have many talks on this series that are actually moving us away from this idea that here are all the good things and here are all the bad things, or here are all the normal people and here are all the weird people. All these categories are really not helpful. It might have been a good way to start studying psychology. Psychology is quite a young discipline, so you have to start somewhere, and maybe that was the only way, who knows. But now we're grown up enough to kind of move away from that and really look into the finer details, because there is a lot of potential there. You know that's what a baby or a young child is good at. Let's use that to make sure that they get from us what we want them to get. And and then thinking what that is, again, it's another big topic, right? Because
I mean, the I would say, when it comes to concentration, I completely see what you're saying about kind of diversity and difference and that type of thing. I feel quite evangelical actually about concentration, just because we spend, like, with a child, if you take an 18-month-old to put them in a nursery, they're often in a room with like 20 other kids, a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. And this is one area where I really do see like a clear benefit to, like not putting children in these super noisy education environments where there's a lot going on. So I completely agree with the general principle that the more you start to understand things, the more you realize that everything's got strengths and weaknesses and that type of thing. But this is definitely one area where I do feel evangelical, that I think we need to be reducing noise in schools. We need to be more aware that children find it harder to filter out kind of distractions and that type of thing. So yeah, so I'm not a campaigner about many things, but this is one thing I'm a bit of a campaigning about, Sylvia.
Thank you, Sam. And on a personal level, it's super helpful. I've started looking into childcare for my baby who is 10 months old. So this is definitely the one thing I'm going to be looking at.
Oh, good. Yeah. That's one. I was auditioning when we were looking for nannies for ours. Then that was my one thing too. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sam, thank you so very much.
Oh, good.
This
It's been
has
a
been
real
another
pleasure.
wonderful. Yes, thank you so much, and we hope to have you back.
Definitely.
You can maybe update us about what else you're gonna find, and we wish you all the best with your research, and look forward to having you back.
Lovely. No, I'd really like that, Sylvia. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Bye.